Under every stone lurks a politician. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion tonight is the divide between politics and the people. Joining us this evening on the show to discuss all this and more are Professor Rohan Samarjeeva, Chair, Learn Asia, Attorney at Law, Kaushalya Navaratna, President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Attorney at Law Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Centre for Policy Alternatives, as well as Dr. Main Mendis, Senior Lecturer, Open University of Sri Lanka. Joining us this evening to pose questions from our panelists, on to my immediate right is Nilesh Adethambi, Consultant English News Director at Newsfirst, as well as Shihar Anis, Executive Director for the Centre for Investigative Reporting. You too can join in as far as the conversation is concerned. The number to send in your WhatsApp messages is 076 656 5353. The number once again, 076 656 5353. So tonight, to get the ball rolling, let's quickly speak to Professor Rohan Samarjeeva, Chair of Learn Asia, with regard to Sri Lanka's current climate when it comes to politics, economics, as well as the state of affairs in the country. Your time starts now.
I would begin by saying that in fact there is a divide between people and politicians and politics everywhere in the world. Because generally politics is a sort of, it's an effort to win consent. And in order to win consent, people tend to tell simple stories, simplistic stories. They are aided and abetted by the media. Maybe present company accepted, but generally speaking, the media aids and abets in this simplification of a complex reality. And the whole idea is to sort of keep the people docile and uninformed and giving consent to various things that are happening. So, for example, I would take an area that I am deeply interested in and which is quite important to the country today, economics. For the longest time, I had been having conversations with various media outlets about the need to engage our people in economic topics in Sinhala. And I was being told, no, that's mostly in English. That's where we have that conversation in English, but not in Sinhala. But now, when everybody had to stand in line and do without cooking gas and do without fuel and lose their livelihoods and see their small businesses go under, then economics, the importance of economics came up. And I have never seen the amount of enthusiasm that we have for economic topics and for understanding economic issues as we see now. I mean, this has been building up. This has been building up over the last few years. It's not like somebody turned a switch. But the whole idea of engaging people in this conversation has been very slow in coming, because I think the general preference was to talk about emotionally workable, emotionally fruitful things for politicians, to say this guy, this party, this set of colors, these are the good people and those are the bad people. And then we had also the 30-year war, where it also caused a lot of people to sort of do this polarizing thing, good, bad, good, evil, our people, those people, and forget about the fact that there was a corrosion of the entire economy that was going on over the last 75 years. And that in fact, it is the fact that pandering to the middle classes, that was what was going on. It was not pandering to the poor. There are lots of people who say that Sri Lanka was a welfare state that was too generous with the poor. The poor have actually been quite mistreated. A lot of our programs have been focused on the middle classes. And the whole idea was to sort of pull the wool over everybody else's eyes. The really rich, the powerful, they were able to do deals, get around these things. But as long as you kept the middle classes quiet, kept them happy, threw them various sops, then politicians could function. I mean, I would use this example, right? Value-added tax, indirect taxes are now 59% of all the revenue comes, that is, everybody pays these taxes, right? We're talking about VAT, we're talking about excise taxes, things like that, right? Very little fuss about that, because this is what really affects the poor people. Now come income taxes. We see the media getting all excited, all the professionals getting excited, even trade unions where pretty much everybody is under the threshold. The teachers' unions, for example, they're not making a lakh a month. The teachers' unions were getting involved in protesting the tax regime, right? Why? Because this is the con job that has been going on in this country all this time. So when value-added taxes went from 8% to 15% and now to 18%, 8% to 12% to 15% and 18%. This is easy money for the government. You increase the value-added tax, the money starts flowing in. With income taxes, I mean, I suppose I should talk about taxes today because tomorrow is the last day, and they say that they're going to fine you 50,000 rupees if you don't file on time. I went and stood in line today, so I know. So this is the kind of thing that Ali Sabri, when he was finance minister, said that in 2019 we had 1.5 million taxpayers. That by 2020 it had gone down to slightly over 1 million taxpayers, and that by 2021 we had only 412,000 active files. That's a tiny number, right? That's a tiny number. There's 5.1 million households in this country that are affected by the value-added tax. But I ask you, if you talk about the media attention, the public attention, the trade union attention, what is the relative importance given to value-added taxes versus income taxes? That is the kind of con job that has been going on in this country, and that is one reason why I would say that the people are alienated from politics. They are actually befuddled and confused and actively misinformed about what is going on. So obviously they have to be, and this is not limited to this country, by the way. I mean, what is going on in the United States and various other places is people are beginning to wake up to the con job, and people are going to are talking about it.
Thank you very much, Professor Rohan Samarjeeva, Chair of Learn Asia. I now move my attention towards Attorney at Law Kaushal Navaratnam, President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka.
Yeah, thank you, Shamira. I think by and large, I'm in agreement with what Professor Samarjeeva just explained. If you look at the bitter truth in our country over a period of time, perhaps we talk about only the 75 years from since the independence or whatever, and what has happened to our country, what has happened to our economy, what has happened to our civil service, what has happened to the rule of law, and by and large to the entire society. And it is in chaos. And now we have reached to a point where we find that we can't just turn a blind eye and without talking about it. So if you really analyze in terms of the Sri Lankan context, if you analyze the politics, the people and the politicians, I would say these components are inseparable in terms of the governance, in terms of the rule of law, in terms of our society. So therefore that these are, as Professor was quite correctly, he was heard to say, the con job has done so much of damage to not only to the economy, to the entire nation, and perhaps we are at a stage where we just have to take some proactive role in terms of by the professionals, not only the lawyers, not only the economists, each and every sector will have to be kind of revamped. Look what's happening now. Though 1.5 years ago, the people stood up against the entire kind of the governance sector, the president, the politicians by and large, and they wanted a system change because they took a sort of a wake-up call, at a time where they really felt it. And it's not that, as he correctly said, it was not something which just happened overnight. It was a kind of a systematic thing that happened, and people started suffering. But perhaps the manner in which it was, inculcated in the minds of the people were not really aware of it. They were not taking the call. They did not realize the danger that was coming towards them. They but slept over it. ultimately it came to a stage where we, all of us, you and I both, had to basically spend nights without the electricity, perhaps, as he said, no gas, no transport, and top of everything, in view of the outbreak of a pandemic, look at the pathetic situation. No proper, the standard medicine is available in the country. And look, the people are finding it extremely difficult. So it's, I would say that because of these reasons, because of the suffering, but I would, at the same time, just as a professional, I just look at it in a slightly different point of view as well. Look at the younger generation. Now they have started, retorting, revolting. They don't accept what the politicians always come and say now. They always question them. They challenge them. That is something, basically people, they especially in the local context, the politicians will not like it. And that is where we can find a lot of bills are being brought in. And that is being challenged by us. Why? You don't want people to give that absolute kind of freedom to express themselves.
Right.
They have to be suppressed. The voice have to be suppressed. If not, the free rights, what is available at the moment for the politicians, will be curtailed. So that is something, we have, all of us, there is a duty cast on you as well as on us to see to it that these things are challenged at the proper time, and you have the correct system put in place. If not, I don't think for the next 100 years or 200 years, we will come out of this and we will continue with the same thing, especially in a context you look at just people into India, where they were like, perhaps 10, 15 years ago. If you go to India, if you go to other countries, how the economy has evolved, how the countries have moved on, and how the systems have been, put in place. But coming back to Sri Lankan context, do we have anything on that line?
Right. So, Kaushalya, just to get some context to the discussion that we're having today, what is the role of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka?
Bar Association, role of the Bar Association, of course, mainly, I would say, we are governed by our constitution. Our objectives are recognized in this constitution. And it's not only on the question of the rights and the needs of the members of the bar. By and large, we will be looking after the interest of the general public, the citizens, rule of law, and the independence of the judiciary as well. And those are some of the main matters on which that we will be having our interest.
So the Bar Association of Sri Lanka also has political ambitions?
I don't know, because that is not a question that I perhaps
That is the question that was brought in by President Ranil Wickremesinghe in Parliament, saying that Salia Peiris, your former President of the Bar Association, wanted to become the Prime Minister of the country.
I think that question was, or rather statements was duly replied by my predecessor, and it is given wider publicity through the media. He has totally denied that, because if it is in his personal capacity, something which I'm completely unaware of. But of course, Mr. Peiris has issued a statement saying there's absolutely no truth in it.
Because if you look at the last year, Kaushalya, the Bar Association was playing a big role in terms of putting out a press release, in putting out an agenda for President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. So when something of this sort comes in or made by President Ranil Wickremesinghe himself, it goes to show that there is some ulterior motive or agenda behind this.
Of the President?
I don't know, you tell me.
Yeah, I also, as far as the Bar Association is concerned now, in fact, the Bar Association has challenged most of the bills that were brought in, and we are not silent. Of course, the publicity was perhaps may not have been given to the extent to which the publicity was given to the BASL during the last 1.5 years. But certainly, wherever we feel that the rule of law is threatened and the rights and the independence of the judiciary is threatened, right of the citizens are challenged, that is where we always have chipped in. And certainly that is not something which we will just turn a blind eye.
Right. Thank you very much, Kaushalya. I now move my attention towards Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Center for Policy Alternatives.
Well, Shamir, I think it's very important to recognize what has happened in our recent past. I recognize what the two previous speakers said in terms of quite dire situation where the country is. But it's also important to recognize that people have become much more active and engaged in politics. And that culture of letting politicians and elites decide without any question is fast disappearing. There is much more engagement, there is more criticism, there is more communication, and there is a debate even with what's happening with the budget and everything. So I think we need to recognize things have changed somewhat. But I think in the larger scheme of things, unfortunately, decision making and policy making is very much limited to a few. And that's the problem. So last year we saw this unprecedented mobilization where people stood up, demanding for a change. And that change was because of a governance crisis. And Sri Lanka was really at the bottom. You know, even despite decades of conflict, cycles of violence, we had not been in a situation like that. So there was also an opportunity to think of a new Sri Lanka, a new vision. Now I feel some opportunities were missed in terms of what could have been done, what could have happened. But we also need to recognize the debates have changed somewhat. If you look at even Kaushalya's point about all these laws that are being brought about, why is it being brought about? Because there is a fear that people are becoming more critical, getting more engaged, getting more active. And the fact that, and I want to also put this on record, the government this year attempted to bring an anti-terror law twice. We've debated that in this program itself. They tried to bring the broadcasting bill. Now, I think it's now approved by cabinet. But all these attempts also were pushed back by a very engaged citizenry, by a media that is much more engaged, aware. So while we recognize some things have not changed, other things have changed. So there is more political accountability. There is a change in culture. We need to recognize that. Just that some of the old guard that doesn't want change is still very much playing those cards. So while there are changes, some things haven't changed. But the fear that people will continue to agitate is what is making these suppressive laws keep coming back.
So, Bhavani, you said that last year there was a governance crisis and that is why the people were on the streets. Don't you think that we are in a crisis even now?
Of course we are. I mean, I'm not saying things are hunky-dory. I'm saying the crisis continues.
We don't see people engaging as what we saw last year.
No, we see people engaging. I disagree with your comment. I think people are engaging at a different level. But last year was an unprecedented crisis. It hit every segment of society. People came out not because they had the political ideas. They came for very specific demands of where are our essential items. We can't be staying in long queues. It's the economic issues that got them to the streets. But people are still protesting. Very recently, the protesters who've been protesting for several months were also attacked in Timbirigasyaya. The protests continue in different parts of Sri Lanka. And people are criticizing, people are writing, people are debating. But you also have to recognize people have been arrested, people have been targeted, people have been called for questioning, there is surveillance. That pressure on the people, that repression is still there. And when you bring in laws, when there's an online safety bill that could change the landscape of how online spaces operate, there is also fear.
Right.
So I think you need to look at the larger context. But people are agitating, people are asking difficult questions. Political accountability is very much there.
When it comes to matters like the cricket saga that took place recently, Sri Lanka wanted a corruption-free country. They wanted a systemic change as far as the governance structure in Sri Lanka is concerned. When you looked at all this, I'm not trying to hold a candle to Roshan Ranasinghe. Whether he's corrupt or not is a different matter, and that has to be discussed on a different platform. However, what happened subsequently, a minister who speaks against corruption is removed subsequently by the head of state as the head of the cabinet. How do you view this? Is this something that can be, said everything is fine, the president had made the right choice?
So there are a couple of issues there, Shamir, and very quickly I think, because this is opening remark. I think we need to look at the power of the executive and how that power is being used. And I will say there is authoritarian tendencies that is there. It's been there for several months. That's one. There is a role of cabinet. There is a role of the minister. We need to look at that as well. There is the whole issue of corruption and governance. There is a governance crisis. There's now a government report worked with the IMF which talks about corruption vulnerabilities. There's a governance diagnostic by the government, but also civil society. 6 civil society groups, including CPA, we also did our own governance diagnostic. Corruption vulnerabilities is very much there. We have not addressed those issues. So I think the Sri Lankan Cricket Board issue is just one example of many examples in terms of corruption, in terms of accountability. And I hope we also get to this issue of corruption, economic crimes, and accountability, and a Supreme Court judgment that is far-reaching. And I hope we can talk about it. So there is some change, but you can't have fundamental changes happening in this landscape overnight.
Right.
This is going to be a long road ahead. But there are many, many issues here that you've raised that I hope we can talk about during the show.
Right. Thank you very much, Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Center for Policy Alternatives, Dr. Mahim Mendis, Senior Lecturer, Open University of Sri Lanka.
What I can say is that the university community, the academics, and the students have been extremely active in narrowing the gap between the people and those in elitist positions, reviving the culture of democracy in every possible way that we can do. So we continue to do our part, working together with the trade union movement and civil and political society organizations and within the university. And the awakened student community remains awakened, and they understand very clearly that there is tremendous power in their hands. As young educated men and women, they have proved beyond reasonable doubt that they have a very special role to play in ensuring that governments will be very careful with regard to suppressive and reactionary legislation that can be brought to undermine the democratic process in general. Now, when it comes to the online safety bill or the previously, I can remember the KDU bill that was brought, trying to militarize the university system and bringing a regimentalized ethos into running of the universities outside the KDU, well, we were able to ensure that that KDU bill was removed, and in doing so, in bringing together the students and the academics and the civil society groups together, we proved long before the Aragalaya that there is tremendous scope in this community. So we continue to do our part, and we also will ensure that whatever legislation that will be brought will be questioned, and in the university system itself there is active debate going on in the university faculty rooms, the departments, and the recent Supreme Court case that was brought. 3 of us were petitioners, there's myself, and Dr. Atula Samarakon and Dr. Nevis Moraes. We were all coming from the same department of the Open University, and we knew that there will be tremendous risk that, involved in this matter. Whether we win the case or whether we lose the case, we will be threatened, and that is what continues to happen now, right? And we have been threatened, saying that those who are petitioners have brought enormous shame and damage to people who liberated the country, and those statements have been made public by very responsible, potentially very high, public opinion leaders, members of the clergy, and we are under threat. But I must tell you that neither the university academic community nor the students can be silenced by suppressive means. And we will continue to do what we have been doing in reviving the culture of democracy.
So, Dr. Mendes, you said that the academic staff at universities nor students would be suppressed by the government. However, if you look at the protests that have been organized by students as far as university system is concerned, have been organized by the Inter-University Students' Federation, which is also a politically affiliated group to the very renowned the Janata Vimukti Peramuna. We all know that.
You said Janata Vimukti Peramuna?
Yeah.
Certainly not.
The Peritugami, the frontline Socialist
IUSF has absolutely nothing to do with the Janata Vimukti Peramuna.
The Peritugami, the frontline Socialist Party. Yeah, the frontline Socialist
But the
Party.
type of issues that they have been raising have not been, issues that the FSP wanted to raise, and we, who are academics, belonging to different political parties, found common ground with them in opposing some of the reactionary legislation affecting universities as well as other frontiers of life.
No, because when you look at the protest that was held recently opposite the United States Embassy, organized by the Frontline Socialist Party, we saw the former convener also getting engaged in this protest campaign that was organized opposite the Colombo University, and this protest was on the Gaza matter that came up to play. I have not seen anything significant that has come forth from the university students, protesters or academics over the last 1 year, unfortunately.
Well,
tell me a few protest campaigns that were organized by the academic staff at universities or the students' federations at universities over the last 1 year, significant protest marches that were organized.
Whatever reactionary measures that have been taken by the government since the Aragalaya was crushed, came from the university community.
No,
the
subsequently. I'm talking about post-Aragalaya.
Post-Aragalaya. So post-Aragalaya, there have been so many student protests. We cannot say that there were
few. There were one.
They were brutally
on the 7th of
suppressed.
there was a protest march on the 7th of March. Then there was a protest campaign on the 7th of June. That's about it this year.
No, there have been protests at university level, and there have been protests.
But we've not seen it, probably at university level.
Yeah, there have been.
So has the government been able to suppress them quite well?
All the protests done by the students have been brutally suppressed in the post-Aragalaya period through extremely radical measures by the security forces.
So the government has won the battle?
We cannot say that the government has won the battle. The students continue to awaken the community. That's all we can say. They have not lost any. The students
when was
have
the
not
last
lost
time? No,
any battle.
Dr. Manis, when was the last time you saw a student group protesting in Colombo?
Well, students have been protesting. You know that students have been protesting.
Tell me an instance.
Well, in different universities over unfair taxes, where you see suppression of democratic rights. I mean, they have been protesting.
In Colombo?
Yes, they have been.
Right. Dr. Mahim Mendes, Senior Lecturer, Open University of Sri Lanka. Right is Nivesh Eliyatambi. Left is Shia Ranis. Let's start off with Shihar.
Of course.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. I think Professor Samarjee brought a valid point on this middle class, right? So, as far as the middle class is satisfied, you won't see massive protest, right? The last year's Aragale was because middle class faced that struggle. They didn't have food, they didn't have gas, they didn't have fuel, right? And we don't see, for instance, like the last week Supreme Court ruling, right? Now, if it is in another country, people will come to the road and ask, what is the response from the government for this kind of people, right? The former leaders and the allies. We don't see public response to even for such important, Supreme Court ruling. Why is that?
But you seem to be equating, I think, both of you, the kind of street protests that we saw last year. You seem to want that to continue. That seems to be the only indicator.
No, I have.
Right?
What I'm asking is
That's very stressful stuff. I don't know whether you've done it, but
No,
in my youth I've done these things.
No, that's true.
It's very, very
what I'm
difficult
asking
stuff
is-
to do.
What I'm asking is why the people are not responding, even to such an important decision, right, from the Supreme Court. We don't see many responses from the people. Just we saw some, talking in the Parliament, but we haven't seen much, public debate about, that ruling, right? The people who are responsible for the economic crisis.
Well, let me flip the question and ask, how many media platforms have been opened up for that public debate? It's a very complex decision, by the way. I've read the damn thing. It's 95 pages. And then there's another, I don't know how many pages
260.
for the dissent, right?
It's 265.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right. It's a monster, right? It's not easy reading, right? And again, remember, it's in English, right? Our Supreme Court decisions are in English. So this has to be kind of this again. This is that question that I brought up, which is where is that bridge between the political developments in the country, which happen to be rather complex, and how is that brought to the public arena, right? And I've been actually disappointed. I mean, I've been too busy with other things, but I've been thinking we need to engage with this. Now, Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa has given his response, formal response, and I think it's high time that other people pitch in, because there are very large issues here. I mean, in public policy terms, there are very large issues. The court said we are not creating a right for perfect decision making or perfect policy making. We are targeting arbitrary and irrational actions. So they carved out a thing that wouldn't upset the entirety of governance, right? I mean, you must remember, people like me, I've been in advisory roles in government, and I think, hey, yeah, can somebody take me down on this one, right? Right? So that question is also on our mind.
No, I think what Shihar wanted to come to is, let's take a look at the 36% tax for an example, Professor Samarjee.
Again, I tell you, 36% is not the problem.
Yeah.
It's the 18% that is the problem.
Absolutely.
Who is talking about the 18%?
So let's talk about the 18% tax. Who's talking about
Who
it?
is talking about it?
No one.
I would ask whether the media is talking about it.
No, we're doing it right now.
I know, but is it enough?
Certainly, our channels have certainly been talking.
We are talking about
But
it even now.
That's the issue. You see, when the middle class gets their ox gored on the income tax, and I said it's a small number. It's people who make more than $1 lakh a month, right? It's people who make more than $1 lakh a month. That's the group. That's not the entirety of this country. But the value-added tax affects everybody. And remember, now I've got some numbers here, on the VAT, when the VAT was 15%, we were estimating that they would raise 673 million this year. We have to estimate because the year isn't over.
Billion.
Yeah, this year. Now, with the 18%, again, I've done some back-of-the-envelope calculations, and I would say that's 808. The requirement to meet the government salary bill, right? The state workers getting 10,000 a month and the pensioners getting 2,500 is not met. There's a shortfall of 51 billion. And that 51 billion is going to be covered by removing 87 of the 137 VAT exemptions, right? That could include, for example, electricity. That could mean 0 to 18% tax imposed on electricity. Could, I don't know, right? Now, these are issues that should be talked about. Now, the budget has got these numbers. I have done the calculations. But where's the platform, right? What I can do is I can write an op-ed, and I write everything that I do in Sinhala as well, right? I can get the conversation started on my side. Who am I?
But don't you think, Professor, even the opposition is not discussing about this enough?
Well, what can I say about the opposition? That is part of the disappointment of our system, right? What we have is a dysfunctional opposition. I mean, it's an opposition that thinks that, you know, going to grab people and attack people and run away with things is what their role is. They have to get into substantive discussion. I'm not saying there aren't opposition politicians who do that. There are. But unfortunately, it's not enough of them. So we need more, I mean, the kind of discussion, kind of conversation that Bhavani was talking about, we need more of a focus, more of a platform for that. And we need people who are opinion leaders, and we have to include the politicians. It's not just people other than politicians, but politicians have to play a role here.
Yeah.
So they have to bring this conversation to the fore.
Dr. Mendes, you also actively involved with the SJB political party affairs as well. The SJB is the main opposition in Parliament. And when Professor Wan Samarjeeva says there is a dysfunctional opposition, what do you have to say about that?
Well, he's entitled to his opinion, but you cannot say that the opposition is dysfunctional. The opposition is doing its best. In Parliament, they have been very actively raising issues on a daily basis. They have been questioning the government, and on behalf of the people, they have been raising issues. So
I remember, I remember, Dr. Mendes, I joined journalism in 2004 when I was 18 years old. When I joined journalism in 2004, there was a massive protest against the increase of gas prices in Sri Lanka by the UNP-led government in the year 2004. That protest march was from Dondra Head to Colombo, led by then opposition leader Mahinda Rajapaksa. I still remember this because I reported on this matter at that time. Now prices of electricity is being increased. Prices of gas has been increased overnight. I will tell you a classic example. Today, 3 houses in my lane, Dr. Mendes, electricity was disconnected because they have failed to pay their tariffs. Where is the opposition now? Tell me, what are they doing now? So when Professor Wan Samarjeeva says there is a dysfunctional opposition, I think it's true.
Well, the focus of the opposition may not be entirely on those issues that you are talking about.
What are they talking about?
We are very concerned about.
They're talking about getting a sports minister to an opposition leader's office and discussing about the
elections,
corruption.
presidential elections, the democratic rights that have been suppressed, and we are very active in creating the necessary public opinion, reviving the people to ensure that they will continue to fight for their rights.
Is that going to the grassroots, Dr. Mendes? Is that going to the grassroots?
Well, we can say that it has not, in the way you say, it has not gone to the
No, I'm not saying this. I'm not saying that. I'm saying what the people are thinking.
Well, the people say different things, but the opposition continues to be fair by the opposition. The opposition
Dr. Mendes, forget about your affiliation with the SJB. Forget about your affiliation with the SJB, and now as a layman, as a senior lecturer of the Open University of Sri Lanka, you tell me now, is the opposition doing enough?
Well, the opposition should be doing much more, maybe. But what I'm saying,
why maybe?
It is absolutely
why maybe
unreasonable to say that we have a dysfunctional opposition. The opposition is doing nothing. That is absolutely unreasonable. The opposition is doing what it can do to the best of its ability.
Opposition doing enough? That's the problem.
Well, I also hope the opposition will do much more.
Right, thank you very
That's
much.
a different story.
Right. That's what I wanted to get at, Dr. Mendes. The opposition has to do more, and they're not doing it right now. So, Kaushal, take a look at the court cases, what happened recently, a judgment that was unprecedented. What do you think the role of the opposition should be now? Because everyone is saying that now the opposition should move a motion to suspend the civic rights of the people who have been named and shamed by courts. What should be the
Yeah,
step?
Shabir, let me put it in this way. Giving a leadership to a profession or a professional body where we don't get involved in politics. We always try to be apolitical without, I may be having my political inclination, we may be having our political opinions, but so long as we hold position at the Bar Association and we got to be apolitical and, without leaning towards a political party or a government or opposition, we express our independent opinions. And listening to both speakers, Professor Samarajee and
Dr. Mendes.
Dr. Mendes, and I would put it in this way, Samir, we have to go beyond our traditional roles, and getting up in Parliament and saying for this, making statement for the sake of making statements, we have
Statements is gallery, that's what they call it.
That's because I want to say that, but of course we have to move on. We have to go beyond that, and that is the need of the hour, I would say. That is the need of the hour, and in terms of the legal spheres, or rather, if I may put it in this way, like within the realm of the law, there are certain roles that have been recognized by the law. That is, basically normally what the opposition has to do, and what would be the role of the government. And here we are looking at, I'm not trying to get into any or rather criticize the opposition or the government here. And I would say that they have to be more proactive in their kind of discharging in their duties. And otherwise, and you
Who
just
should be proactive?
I would say that even the opposition must be more proactive, and not only the opposition. Even now, that is something. Look at the professionals, and I would say.
All fingers pointed, Dr. Mendes.
No, I'm not. Certainly, it is not my role here. But it's just that I just want to express.
You're just saying it, but you're implying something else, Kaushal.
Yeah, I think.
Because you said I want to be apolitical, and then you came and said the opposition should be proactive.
No,
so then you point the finger at Dr. Mendes in return.
No, I don't think that he represent. The opposition is being represented by Mr. Mendes. And,
no, he's not representing the entire opposition, but he's representing the main ruling party of the opposition.
That's very good. I don't know because I'm not aware of it. But it's just that I'm saying getting into this point, Shamir, because therefore that if I'm to repeat myself, we have to go beyond the traditional role, getting onto the road. Of course, certainly yes, and you have to have that mass protest, and you have to raise your voice. And you have to basically publish articles. You have to make the public aware of what's happening, and that's why this Professor Samarajee said right along they have been successful. Why the con job? And by conning, I would say, I'm not a sort of a good term to use in a public debate, in a public forum. Still, the politicians have been able to kind of mislead the public in order to obtain, rather gain what they want in their spheres or the respective fields. So therefore, we as professionals, and that's what the role of the Bar Association, you just got on to the question of the recent judgments. It is true, the recent judgments, and it is a fundamental right application where I was present in court when the judgment was pronounced. His Lordship, the Chief Justice, was very careful in basically reading out the judgment. He said it's the jurisdiction and the burden of proof in this case, these are the principles that normally we apply in courts in proving cases. This is a fundamental right application where the criminal aspects have not yet been kind of looked into, and therefore that is a matter that, as he correctly said, this is the politicians are holding those positions in the trust of the public. And so long as you don't violate and flout the public trust, then there is no issue here. But of course, you are accountable, and that is something which has not happened in the past. So then people, perhaps the politicians, perhaps the public sector, even some of the people who are in the private sector who are responsible in taking decisions, and if they have taken decisions without, basically look into these aspects, the accountability, and especially that your responsibilities of the positions, and that is where the Supreme Court has given a good signal, and you are not going to have a sort of a freedom of a violence. You are responsible. Can be held responsible for the acts you have done while holding a position, and
But what's
you are
the
holding
next
in the
step,
position in the
Kaushal?
public.
But what's the next step? Right now, the court has given a judgment. It's very clear. But what is the next step? Don't you think that step should be proactively engaged, advanced by the opposition itself?
Yeah, so that is of course that is the open debate. That is exactly what I think all of us
Isn't
are in
the
agreement.
debate we should have?
The debate.
Civic rights, or should it be a political matter, political accountability, rather than removal of civic rights? I don't think it's an open and shut case on the side of the civic rights. Why? Shouldn't this be debated, this political accountability, and it should be decided in the political arena rather than
But
by
it's not happening now, Professor Samarjee.
Let's do it. We have 1.5 hours.
We have a situation where we all agree it was a landmark judgment, but that's it. Nothing further has happened or looks likely to happen. We're debating things, but some of at least one of the persons found responsible, I think former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, said he won't accept the judgment, and things continue on. So they poof the Supreme Court judgment, and they go on as if it's business as usual.
Yeah, one of the main issues is, that's why I said it's a fundamental application where penal sanctions have not been imposed. And the court has no jurisdiction to impose any penal sanctions other than the cost or the recovery of.
Yeah, and that has been said on the judgment
itself. And if someone wants to take this as the start for another cause of action, that is a matter that must be agitated. That's why I think, Samir, you were quite right in saying, rather than addressing the gallery, these are matters that must be taken, that must be advanced, that must be debated, that must be taken to court if someone feels.
But a cause of action by whom? By political parties, by civil society organizations, or by the public themselves?
Yeah, so it's like this, and here these cases were filed. It's a public interest litigation where the pronouncement has now been made by the apex court in the country. So there is a sort of a clear finding vis-a-vis the acts done whilst holding certain positions for the trust of the people, and that finding is there. So, and the Supreme Court has held that certain people are responsible for the economic debacles in the country. So the second activity, if there are sufficient, of course it's a finding of Supreme Court, the criminal charges to be kind of framed against them. That's a matter that will have to be, it could be, but of course to have a person indicted in the High Court, it's not something which can be done.
So the lawyers need a trump just to start litigation, right?
The lawyers, of course, always we have the trump, but it's just that there are certain procedures.
You are waiting until someone files a petition, right?
Not really. I don't think anyone is. As far as the Bar Association is concerned, I think we don't wait.
No, I just want to pick Bhavani's brain on this. Now, while the opposition is asleep and is being distracted, why not the CPA take center stage and do something about it as a civil rights organization?
So,
an active civil rights organization.
Shamir, can I comment on a couple of things that I've been listening, quite amused with where this is going. Things are happening. I think it's about how you measure what's happening, and I think this whole thing about immediate results is something also that needs to be questioned. Just because there was a judgment 10 days ago doesn't mean you're going to suddenly get everyone active and filing cases. Now, I said there's agitation, quite right. there are people now who didn't earlier go to court to file cases. I mean, we've been filing cases for over 2 decades. Many of those who are filing now are new people, which is excellent. More and more people need to file cases. But expecting everything to happen within a space of 10 days is also not realistic. What is it that you're trying to do? Bombard the courts and then have such high expectation that if an immediate result doesn't happen, then there's disappointment? No. This is a landmark judgment in that it holds key officials accountable. But this is not the first judgment where a former head of state has been held accountable. We need to recognize this. A former president was held accountable several years ago in the Water's Edge case. Subsequently, in the Easter Sunday FR case, another former head of state was accountable. Now we have the Supreme Court, the highest court of the land, holding 4 former presidents accountable in fundamental rights applications. So the judiciary, if you look at jurisprudence, is sending a clear message that there is accountability for action. But as Kaushalya says, these are fundamental rights applications. So who can take then criminal action? That's one action, one course of action. Who can do it in Sri Lanka? It's the Attorney General's department. It's the public prosecutor in Sri Lanka. The state. It's a state, part of the state. Now, I mean, others could disagree. I will say the Attorney General's department is not the most efficient body. So are you expecting an entity that is now part of the government to suddenly wake up and say in 10 days, we're going to file cases? That is expecting far too much of an institution. But there are other things, I agree, that can happen. There can be debates, there can be conversations about what to do next. But also, can I put this out here? Sri Lanka has a culture of impunity. We have seen this for decades. Suddenly to expect Sri Lankans, civil society, the opposition, others, to suddenly wake up and say, no, we're going at it, in 10 days everything is going to be done, is asking for too much. What is the accountability that has happened for the cycles of violence, for the human rights violations that has happened over the decades? Not much. It's the impunity that we saw over the decades that has resulted in a culture where officials from the most powerful executive president to other officials think they can escape doing anything they want to. So to chip at impunity, you need a whole host of action. Just going to court is not going to give you immediate results. The other issue I think we need to recognize that I wanted to highlight with the role of the Attorney General's department is institutions in Sri Lanka, they are fundamentally flawed. They are not independent anymore. Now, this is not something that Bhavani Fonseca is saying. These are undocumented reports. The governance diagnostic that the government was part of also recognizes, it even talks about an independent prosecutor's office. So when you have structures that are deeply flawed, deeply politicized, and there is a delay in justice, then to suddenly expect.
No, but the problem is, Bhavani, you said you can't ask for too much, but don't you think enough is
you
enough?
Can't expect too much
just
to happen in 10 days.
Forget about everything, Bhavani, just look at the appointment of the acting Inspector General of Police today.
Thank you, Shamin, for raising it, because I think that's a very valid, very important question, because this is something not just about the appointment of the IGP that's at stake here. We are now having a near crisis where the Constitutional Council is being put to question by the executive arm, by politicians. I think it's a very important question, because the IGP's appointment, the acting IGP's appointment raises multiple questions. Why is an individual, and it's a question I'll put here, why is an individual who faces serious allegations serious allegations on multiple counts. From last year, just last year in the Aragale, there is evidence of his involvement. This year, the Attorney General indicts him. Now, you can say there is a court process, all of that is before court. But there are serious allegations. His name has now been appointed, he is now appointed, reportedly by media, they say, as the acting IGP. Questions of what about the integrity of that office? Who should be part of that office? What is the process of appointment? Did the Constitutional Council have a role? Now, I raise this because there is a question the President has raised in Parliament about the role of the Constitutional Council. And I raise it here because there is now debate whether the Constitutional Council should be part of the executive. These are very serious issues.
So, Professor Rohan Samarjee, it boils down to the question, is this what we wanted?
Well,
Is this what Sri Lanka wanted?
No, I think I agree with Bhavani. This is not a case where you can turn on a switch. I mean, institutional change doesn't happen that way. I mean, sometimes you think revolutions result in these kinds of dramatic changes. Revolutions actually result in a lot of bloodshed and destruction rather than good things coming about like you turn on a switch. So it's a very incremental kind of step. I mean, there are further issues here. Where is the Constitutional Council at full membership? Where are the small parties in the Constitutional Council? It's running with vacancies. Why are we not? Why has that been forgotten? Why isn't there action being taken on that? That was the overall design, was that the small parties should have a representation on the Constitutional Council, right? So I think this is the way the process works, I'm afraid. Incrementalism, I'm an incrementalist, I'm a reformist, I'm not a revolutionary. Incrementalism works like this. It's, you go by inches.
So how long must we wait for?
You've been waiting 75 years, wait a little longer.
Another 75 years.
Another 75, oh my God.
I don't think I'll be living.
Can I pose this question to Bhavani? Now, it was mentioned that the opposition may be dysfunctional, but looking at in the context of the country as a whole, isn't Parliament itself dysfunctional? And I say this because we have millions of people in this country who are literally starving. You can sugarcoat it in whatever way you want to describe it, say they can't find 3 meals a day or whatever, but if you can't find 3 meals a day, you're not starving to death, but you are starving. But we have that kind of situation, and we can go on describing the economic situation of the people for hours, but we have that kind of situation, but we have a parliament which is talking about cricket and all these useless acts and laws which they keep, they keep popping up like mushrooms. Whether the BASL was, the president was trying to become the prime minister and all this, isn't Parliament itself completely dysfunctional right now in terms of the national issue?
Is that a serious question? No, I mean, I think Parliament can play a much more important, constructive, robust role. I agree. And I think at this moment, on multiple issues, not just on the economy, on multiple issues, they must play, they must give leadership, they must act as an effective opposition. I think the issue that is not discussed here is also, it's not just dysfunctional, it's fragmented. I mean, there is an opposition leader, but is every party in the opposition coming together on these issues? Are they on a common platform? Now, remember, this is in the immediate backdrop of an Aragale that put issues in terms of reform issues, in terms of governance issues, in terms of abolishing the executive presidency. I mean, these were issues that people were pushing. Where are these issues? Who's championing them in Parliament? So I think I agree, there are huge problems in Parliament in different layers, but I think also, now remember the fact that we were supposed to have local government elections this year.
I'm glad you brought that up.
No, and we are in court. I mean, this week, these cases are being taken up in court, in the Supreme Court, and 2 of the opposition parties are in court. So I'll give them that credit, that the interim order that was obtained on the local government elections to release money came from a petition filed by the SJB. I'll recognize that. The NPP came after that. We are in court on this. So there is some activism in that. On the online safety bill, on other things, there is some work being done. Is it enough? Not at all. I think there can be much more done by the opposition, but by everyone else. We can't be pinpointing and sitting here and said X didn't do this, Y didn't do this, and just putting the blame on someone else. I think all of us need to play a bigger role. But coming back to the whole issue of political accountability, of corruption, of governance reform, again, we can do so much. Shamir's question is CPA going to do a lot more? Of course we will do a lot more. We will. And you can be invited for that. But I think, I'll turn to Kaushalya on this, the Bar Association, and I'm a member of the Bar. The Bar Association also can play a key role. I think that needs to be recognized. I was proud to be a member of the Bar Association last year because of the positions taken, reflecting the calls of the people, but grounded on the importance of democracy and on the rule of law. Now we are having a situation at this moment where the independence of the judiciary is called to question by politicians, by the executive. We have a situation, a crisis, where the Constitutional Council is being targeted by the executive. This is a moment the Bar Association can give leadership on the rule of law. It needs to give leadership. And maybe this is a time where the Bar Association also has, because of the role it plays, organize a conversation about the public trust doctrine. That's jurisprudence in Sri Lanka. So I think everyone, not just putting you on the spot, everyone has a role to play. But it's very easy to say the opposition is not doing, the media is not doing.
But
so I think we all need to take responsibility.
One sentence to this. Instead of just focusing on the opposition, I think Parliament has actually done some good stuff. I mean, we have the anti-corruption law that went in. It has got its imperfections. The asset recovery law is being worked on. That was one of the biggest problems that people pointed out. But there's a committee working on the asset recovery component. The election, the campaign finance thing, very short, tiny little piece of legislation. I just happened to look at it. It's 10 sections. I mean, it's better than the sort of the vacuum that we were living with earlier, right? A lot more work has to be done to make that real, but again, I mean, even I hadn't paid attention to it. It had gone through 8 months ago or whatever, right? It's not a bad thing. And then there are these committees that are meeting, and the committees are doing some good stuff where people are talking across these divides and talking about actual concrete ways
You are talking about the Committee on Public Enterprise.
Ways and Means Committee.
The Ways and
Specifically, I'm talking about the Ways and Means Committee, which has done very good work, right? So it's not this, you see, there's the whole business that media likes, which is this post-mortem, finding fault. Remember, COPA, these are all after the fact events, committees. They sit with the Auditor General and talk about what happened, bad things that happened in the past. The sectoral oversight committees are about the very process of governing. While things are running, they're looking and talking to people.
Dr. Mendes, yes.
Yeah, let me state once again, because it has to be very clearly understood, that the landmark historic case that was filed came about because of a functional opposition. The SJB was instrumental, its leadership, its lawyers, the academics affiliated to the SJB were in the front line in this case. So we have this verdict, and there is so much that the people need to do, and we will be at it. It's just 10 days since the verdict was given, and it is unreasonable. I'm not accusing you, but you see, it is unreasonable for anyone to take the position that the principal opposition party had been indifferent and apathetic and dysfunctional. We should not be saying it because
Dr. Venice, I didn't say that the opposition was dysfunctional.
I did.
Professor Samarji was saying the opposition was dysfunctional.
So the thing is,
So don't point the finger at me.
yeah, but
I just
because of
because of debate purposes.
You said there are no protests.
As a member of this JB, I belong to a party that recognizes the freedom of anyone to state what he or she wants. That is the ethos of this SJB, being a democratic party. But we have to be very, very clear that we have been in the front line, both inside, outside Parliament. The academics, the lawyers, and the party leadership had done its best, nothing but the best, in ensuring that this case was filed, and also we are very, very fortunate that the judiciary came out with a historic judgment which opens up a greater debate and also action to be taken for the future. That is up to the people.
Now we keep talking about the opposition, about Parliament, about the Supreme Court and judiciary, the President and so on, but not so much about what people can do. And would you agree if I say that due to the local government elections not being held, the people have been effectively silenced? Because you can't expect a villager from Munaragala to come to Colombo for protests or to file cases in the Supreme Court. That's not going to happen. But he or she could protest in front of their own Pradeshya Sabha or go and question those local politicians. But that can't be done. So would you say that that is a major factor here?
The elections that have not been held, local government, of course, we will all agree that the elections have to be held, and they have made a mockery of the process, and it is nothing but right that we all do our very best to ensure that democratic elections are held, and we should not be allowing the government to delay elections, because they have been doing things, acting with impunity, taking the law into their hands, and making a mockery of the entire democratic process.
But today there was a news report.
Sorry, just give me a minute. And I believe the comments made by Bhavani wanted some explanation from my end as well, because the Bar Association was referred to. And Shamir, I must say, and I'm proud to say, wherever and whenever the rule of law is threatened and the independence of the judiciary is threatened, and especially matters which are sub judice, and which, when those matters are spoken at different levels where the independence of the judiciary seems to be compromised, the Bar Association has come forward, and always we are really working on that. Not only the last year, during this year, I think the steps which we have taken, perhaps it may not have been in the public domains, or rather given the media publicity the way that we used to, and we have not been very selective based on our political inclination, being selective based on the interest. And here our position have always been very consistent. And even today we took a decision at the Exco to file papers in court to get a pronouncement with regard to the parliamentary privileges. Parliamentary privilege, you must have seen, Bhavani, I think that is one of the points perhaps you may have led for you to just make that comments, where judges are being criticized. But of course I must say in public, if a judge has done something wrong, illegal, and something which is not expected from a member of a judiciary, there is a process to be followed and he must be punished. And we are not going to basically clear people on that. I want to make it clear prior to make my comments. So here is a case where we have seen over and over again, opposition, government, many people in the well of the parliament attack the judiciary and the judicial officers and the judicial proceedings. And as and when, according to their whims and fancies, they get up and make statements. These are not things that should happen in a more kind of democratic society where we say the three pillars of the democracy, the judiciary, etc., and the parliament, where the independence of the judiciary must be preserved. That is the most important pillar out of all three, because that is where you strike a balance, the check and balances. That is how even the constitutional provisions have been, basically included in the constitution. So then we find that, this has been recurrent, and over again it happens. Some people, they do not know the fundamental basics when you criticize a judge or the judicial proceedings. And if you look at the parliamentary standing orders, there are procedures to be followed. I'm not saying Parliament has no power to discuss, some matter, but there's a procedure to be followed. Even the removal of a judge of a court, especially in the apex courts, the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court, the procedure is laid down in the court, the Constitution. And then how to, deal with those situations, it is in the standing orders. What do we see in today's context? They get up, say something based on their interest. So we can't allow that to happen. So we are taking a proactive role, Bhavani, and it is not something which we will allow people to shove it under the carpet. This is for you, it is for us, and that is for the future. If not, when the law is taken into their hands and they just use it the way that they want, and it is not going to, basically should not be. We must have what is called a zero tolerance for these matters. That is why the bar association,
the problem is Kaushalya now. Let's talk about this cricket saga that took place and Professor Ranjit Bandara's conduct at the court proceedings. He had his son seated at the court proceedings, and what was the decision that was taken at the part leaders meeting? Professor Ranjit Bandara won't hear matters relating to cricket as a court committee chairman.
Yes, I mean,
do we want that?
No,
he has to be removed.
No, not only removed, he must be sacked from the parliament, I would say. Why? Look at, who are the people who have taken the decision? Opposition, government, both. And so aren't they acting in, the glove? Aren't they acting in collusion? And this, we are just, taking we want this good governance. There are so many principles that
is
we
the
can... So that is
problem
where...
is, Kaushalya, the way in which individuals are acting, even after last year was the tipping point as far as the people are concerned. They wanted change. Look at what's happening now. It's a repeat of the same things that took place.
So that is what, Shamir, I always say. People who were involved in, at least in certain aspect, who were so-called leaders at the Aragalaya, who were so-called leaders who gave leadership to mobilize the people. Right afterwards, what happened? And they went into their political parties or the political shelters, political ideologies, and they were trying to grab the power from one set. And others want to, basically take the issues of someone else and to, do something else for their political agendas, to achieve their personal agendas, some ulterior motives. So that is the whole issue, and the genuineness of some of the leaders. With all, I'm being candid. I'm so sorry to say this, and genuineness is always, there is a big question right in front of faces. Had they given that true leadership, the people wanted, or rather would have wanted.
Dr. Mendes, you want to respond to that, or?
Right. Now, in the aftermath of Aragalaya and in the final stages of the Aragalaya, the leaders of the Aragalaya, they had discussions with the leader of the opposition, not leader of the SJB, with regard to the...
Well, the SJB leader was chased out,
no, that is, I'm not referring to that. Members of a particular political party, unfortunately, tried to assault the leader of the opposition. That also happened to be a group that tried to claim ownership of the Aragalaya. Now, I'm not here to talk about that political party, but as to the reform process, now the members, the key leaders of the Aragalaya met with the opposition leader, and they made it extremely clear as to what the leaders of the Aragalaya expected the parliament to do, the leader of the opposition and the other parties to do. The interim, all-party, consensus government for the rest of the period. And it is at that time. Now, all what was proposed by leaders of the Aragalaya came to be accepted by, they were accepted by the leader of the opposition. There was no problem because all what he believed in and what they said happened to be harmonious. But that was not going to be possible. That became impossible because someone without any mandate from the people, a person who had been bitterly rejected by the people, took oaths before the president who was running away. And that was made a mockery. The entire process came to nothing because someone who had no mandate took oaths as a president. So the leaders of the Aragalaya were extremely clear. They did not want to form a government.
That's the democratic process in Sri Lanka, Dr. Mendes.
That was what is in the constitution too.
That's what's in the constitution. You can't say he didn't have a mandate. Ultimately, he was very lucky. Now, based on what Ranil Wickremesinghe said in Parliament, everyone wanted the premiership apart from Sajith Premadasa.
No, there was no.
The 13-point agenda put forward by the Bar Association, the first point was stay with the Constitution. That was the first point. I respected that.
Yeah, because we can't.
So Dr. Mendes, you saying that he didn't have mandate or whatever
government was what was possible in line with the culture of democracy. The leader of the opposition, who polled 5.5 million votes at the presidential election,
but do you believe
he did not want to grab power and grip power like Ranil Wickremesinghe, the current president. That was absolutely.
But that was a constitutional appointment, Dr. Mendes. How can you say? How can you say
it had to be an all-party consensus interim regime?
In the present presidency.
So, but there was 134 members who voted in favor of Ranil Wickremesinghe in Parliament. All the members voted in favor. Now there was a secret ballot. Dr. Mendes, you were in Sri Lanka, right, at that time?
Of course. So
you saw what was happening
between the members of Parliament who supported, who were members of.
That is the weakness of Sajith Premadasa for not being able to gain the popular vote in Parliament.
He had 55 members of Parliament, or not even 55 members of Parliament. He cannot be forming a government, and SJP had no mandate. And it was not the right thing to do was to create an all-party consensus interim government. Where
all members, 134,
also said that there wouldn't be an opposition. They all have to come together.
But Dr. Mendes, 134 members of Parliament voted in favor of Ranil Wickremesinghe. 134 members of Parliament voted in favor of Ranil Wickremesinghe.
So that was a very clear deal between the 134 members of Parliament.
We got to be a little more realistic. We got to be a little more realistic. We got to be a little more practical. And this is, somewhat of a political culture in the country. That is where we say that there must be some changes. And that is something which was demanded by the people.
So I want Nilesh, do you have any questions? I just want to pick everyone's brain on the way forward for Sri Lanka.
Yes, well, looking at the way forward, clearly we all seem to be agreed on elections. And elections are coming next year, if we are to believe the president. And of course, constitutionally, there have to be elections. So would you be pushing for local government elections as well, Dr. Mendes?
There should be elections.
But local government as well, so that the people can get in.
There should be elections.
Okay.
Elections at the right time. There should be a fresh mandate. Democracy should thrive. Not interests, partisan, all types of interests of individuals who have grabbed power and grip power.
Which is what is happening in Parliament right now.
So at any point, Parliament can resolve itself.
Which is illicit, immoral and unethical.
Say we need a fresh mandate. Parliament can do that. The President can do that. But Parliament can do that too.
Let me ask one question now. We are talking about the divide between the people and the politicians. Now, we can't, expect the results in 10 days. But for years, after even doing all the corruption, the same people are being elected by the people.
Well, for that we need to have changes in election,
what is going to happen?
in the electoral system. We need changes in campaign finance. The campaign finance law is there, but unless everybody is informed and everybody is on the job and everybody is taking photographs and collecting evidence, there won't be court cases. But just I'll give you one example. Even if we manage to throw out some fellow who has broken the campaign finance law, you know all that will happen. He will go out and the next guy in his list from his party will take his position, right? We need to have a situation where his party loses that seat, right? So those are the kinds of things that we need to think about, because that creates, if you recall the old elections, D.S. Senanayaka's first cabinet lost 2 senior ministers for election petitions. Mr. Anil Gunasinghe was disbarred from contesting for X number of years, right? Because then the opposition will get that seat. They have at least a shot. So there are things that need to be done. If you don't change the electoral system, we could be like Lebanon, right? Lebanon had elections in the middle of all this, and all they got was 12 or 20 new faces, and nothing changed. Everybody who used to be in the Lebanese legislature are still there.
Is there a danger of that happening at the next election?
We need to get these campaign finance laws, all these things focused. We need to focus on these things. We need electoral change.
Mr. Samaji, don't put this idea to the head of state. He might postpone the elections until these campaign regulations are.
It's done. It was number 3 of 2023. The law has been passed. I mean, nobody is paying attention.
But the law has to be applied.
Applied and implemented.
Well, the implementing agency is the Elections Commission. It exists. So it can be done. All that can be done. What we need is the candidates don't know. The candidates have to be educated that you are likely to be thrown out if you violate these rules. But we need to have people who are running around taking pictures.
It was debated in the parliament and voted against by the parliamentarians. Yeah. And these are matters, of course, certainly that will have to be looked into.
See, that is my issue. These are the issues that should be given priority to, not whether, I'm sorry. I mean, I know you guys are in the news business. You like protests. You like marches from Dondra to this place and Pothuil to Jaffna. That's your bread and butter. That's what journalism in this country is. But these issues need to be given prominence. These may be boring, but we need to raise these. People do not protest only by carrying placards. There was a story in today's Lankadeepa about some village tank on the edge of Yala that some fellow had encroached on and had built a hotel. They have documented it and they have managed to get the attention of the national media. Lankadeepa is the highest circulation daily in this country. Something will happen, right? That is the role of the media that I'm talking about. Those kinds of issues. You guys were doing Gammadda. And after Gammadda, you're saying, do this, do that to government. Instead of that, bring out the corruption in the villages. Talk about the issues that need to be paid attention to in Colombo. Because those things are hidden, if not for the media shining its light. People talk about 3 branches of government. There are many political scientists who talk about 4. The media included. The media have a role. Is the media playing that role? Is the question I'm asking. Easy for you to ask questions from everybody else.
On the other hand, we in the media do question whether the other branches.
Yeah, you always do that. I'm asking, are you playing the role?
Well, I think we certainly, yes.
The thing is,
even when our television station was bombed.
Thing is, Professor Samajiva, now, it's not about having protests in Sri Lanka, or that does not fascinate journalists, at least not in the caliber as far as journalists like us we are concerned. But we can't stay for another 75 to 100 years for change to happen. We can't wait for that long. That change has to happen now. 75 years is enough. That's what we are campaigning for. That change has to happen now. Whenever we had opportunities in Sri Lanka, 1996 World Cup, Professor Samarajeva, people could have united at that time. 2004 tsunami, 2009 end of the conflict, 2015 good governance government came into play. Did that happen? It didn't happen. We can't wait for any longer. We can't. I'm 37 years old. I don't want to stay another 100 years to realize that Sri Lanka.
I've got less to go. I've been working hard at this.
But I'm saying we can't wait for long.
No, I'm not saying asking you to wait for 100 years. I think, but the point is, a lot of things are being done. I'm saying, I'm optimistic about some things that have been done. The law is there. I really want to see how it will get implemented. But I think we might finally get a working anti-corruption system going in this country.
There is anti-corruption law, Professor Samarajeva, which came into play a couple of months ago, right? The act was passed in Parliament.
People have not been appointed.
Right. Look at what's happening with regard to the cricket saga now.
I don't know what the pros and cons of the various parties. I have not been paying attention. I have been paying attention to building hotels inside village tanks in Monragal district. I'm sorry, I don't pay attention to cricket. So.
Which certainly we do as well with our government.
But we pay attention to what's happening across the country.
That's why I brought out government. I think it's a good process, but focus not on what government can do for people, but focus on the issues. Focus on the policy issues that are there, on corruption cases.
So let's talk about the way forward for Sri Lanka. I want to start off with Dr. Mendes, with your closing remarks as well. What must we do as a nation, and what must the opposition do now?
Well,
you said more can be done. What do you mean by more?
Of course, we need to be doing better in order to protect democracy in this country. When you say that we need to be doing more, that is absolutely correct. We who belong to a particular opposition party cannot say that we have done absolutely nothing but the best. We all, the entire citizenry, the political parties, the civil society, the political society, we all need to do much better to protect democracy, because first priority is democracy. The second priority is democracy. The third priority is democracy. Everything else is after that. If there is no democracy in this country, we cannot talk about anything. It's useless talking about a constitution. It's useless talking about parliament. It's useless talking about anything if democracy cannot be protected. So my closing remark is that we have to be united. At the elections, of course, the political parties can be safeguarding their identities. That's a different story. But right now, those in opposition, everyone else, we need to unite to protect democracy, and that has not happened. That is very unfortunate. We have to unite for the sake of democracy. And the entire citizenry should know that. And please don't say that a particular party had been dysfunctional and you see we have not been doing our best. We are all doing our best, and we need to do better.
But Dr. My point was that all parties appear to be somewhat dysfunctional, especially in parliament.
I think it is a harsh term, not a reasonable term. We all have to do much better to protect democracy. That much can be said with a sense of humility.
Right, thank you very much, Dr. Mendes. Dr. Mendes, you continue to look at me. I'm not the one who said the opposition is dysfunctional.
I'll take full ownership of that.
In good faith, he used the word.
I'll take full ownership of that, and I'll explain.
Yes, but the thing is, it came from you all also.
Right, attorney at law.
The opposition had been dysfunctional and so on, and I think
opposition
that is
can definitely do
absolutely unreasonable.
The opposition,
Because all
as
these
you said,
victories that we are talking about, including the historic Supreme Court case,
Dr. Mendes,
you see, came to be
Dr. Mendes,
the work of the opposition.
Dr. Mendes, in your opening remarks, you said the opposition can do more.
Can do more.
Yeah,
well,
so that's what we're
with
saying.
a sense of
The opposition
humility,
can do more.
I should say,
Right.
if the leader of the opposition, the entire opposition should admit
Right.
that they need to do much better
Right.
to protect democracy in this country.
Right. That's the point. Dr. Mendes, thank you very much. Senior Lecturer, Open University of Sri Lanka. Attorney at Law Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Center for Policy Alternatives.
So I'll take from the point he ended in that I think we can all do more. It's not just the opposition, everyone around this table and everyone who's watching and others. Because in a way, we talk about ways forward. We are going into an election year. We have to talk about a whole spate of things that can be done. We need to have a reform agenda, kind of looking at the key issues. But, one of the things I think we need to ask, a fundamental question is citizenship. Is everyone equal in this country? We talk about civil political rights and say, okay, democracy, rule of law, and that's what, the focus of this show has been. But a couple of days ago, citizens of this country tried to remember their dead in the north and east, and they couldn't. So we talk about elections and democracy. When people can't remember their dead, there is also an issue here. Is everyone equal in this country? Who is speaking up for these people? So I will say we need to look at corruption, we need to talk about governance, we need to talk about human rights, we need to talk about the rule of law, we need to talk about reconciliation. We talk about 75 years after independence. Next year will be 15 years after the end of the war. Have we addressed the root causes of the conflict? So ways forward, there's a whole spate of things we can do. We have some good laws. This year we saw some good laws being passed. Can it be implemented? Is there political will and leadership? And it's not just looking at the government and politicians, even others. So there's a whole spate of things that can be done. But one thing I think that we need to recognize here is if you don't address the fundamentals, and that's not going to happen overnight, we're going to see this repeat itself. What happened last year was a wake-up, that people are not just going to stand by. You lose the trust of the people, you need to be ready to go home. The Supreme Court confirmed that you can't hide behind the legalese. The fundamental responsibilities that each of us have. Political leaders having much more. What is it that they're going to do? What is it that professionals will do? What is it that media will do? As academics, activists, we all have a role to play. But we also need to recognize that everyone should be treated equally. Human dignity should be at the heart of it. And if that is not there, there is a fundamental problem. We can talk about all the reforms, but if you don't recognize everyone as having basic rights, then we're not going to address the root causes. So let's look at everything on the whole. Let's look at political accountability. Let's look at the political culture. Let's look at what each of us can do. And because Kaushalya raised the fact that by association is going to be doing it, that's excellent. I think we all can be doing much more. And into the next year, we are already into December in a couple of days' time, and 2024 is going to be a key year. I hope this show not just looks at what is the opposition doing, but what is within an election year, within a reform agenda, within a year where we are marking 15 years after the end of the war. Where should Sri Lanka be? Where should Sri Lankans be heading towards is the question. And so I hope there's a lot more that we can discuss, but maybe also the thing is, you do the GAMMAT, the program out of Colombo, maybe something like this also needs to go out of Colombo. Do it in Jaffna, do it in Batticaloa, do it in other areas, so that there is a great engagement. And maybe it's not just the Colombo folk who come and talk about these things as well. Open it up, make it more transparent, inclusive. So there's a lot more that we each can do. So it's not just a political opposition or a civil society, everyone can do much more, but also be realistic that 10 days after a Supreme Court judgment, don't expect everything to happen overnight. And I'm not just saying this because I'm the cynic, I'm just saying things take a long time. And it's going to be a long road ahead, but election years also open up spaces where we can hold individuals, parties accountable. And that's why that reform agenda needs to be thought through without just jumping the gun and rushing.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Centre for Policy Alternatives, Attorney at Law Kaushal Navaratna, President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka.
Yeah, thank you, Shamir. And I think I'm more or less in agreement with all the sentiments expressed by Bhavani. And in my close remark, I would like to say once again that we have to basically move away from our traditional slogans. We must look at things more objectively. And we as professionals, or like even perhaps academics, the professionals and other stakeholders in the society, shall not take decisions based on their political inclinations, based on their political agendas. And we must take examples. If you look at something beyond the Sri Lankan jurisdictions, you see what has happened in the other part of the world, especially when they have gone through this type of crisis, how they have come out of this crisis, how they have put their, the country on the right track. And these are things that we can always take proper lessons. If you go to a country like Singapore, perhaps the Hong Kong as far as our judicial system is concerned, it is quite remarkable. Now you go to India, the way that they are put their, all these aspects right on the correct perspective. I think these are matters that we have to kind of take into our proper consideration. And on top of that, we as professionals, I think we have a bigger role to play, rather than taking sort of, as I said, the political interest or other, the ulterior motive. So this is something that all of us, either together, we shall advocate and agitate. And on top of that, I think we all said the people who are in the parliament were taking all kind of decisions, and they are just acting together as and when their rights and their the interests are compromised and or challenged, and who are the people who are responsible. Then it is the citizens. And as Bhavani said, next year is a very crucial year in terms of the Sri Lankan context, and you are gonna again get a chance to get the right people at the right place. So, and you have to be vigilant, exercise your right, and get the right people at the right place, so that at least, let's be hopeful, some good will happen to this country. And that is where the professionals will have to play a key role.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Kaushal Navaratna. Professor Rohan Salanji.
Last April, May, thereabouts, one of the things that I was trying to do was I was trying to bridge the Aragalaya, which had the tendency to perhaps spin off into some form of pure anarchy, with the political actors. And during that time, one of the words that I heard from all sides was Sakriya Puravasiya, active citizens. Because we see our tendency has been extraordinary enthusiasm during time of election, very high participation rates in elections, voting rates. But between elections, people kind of switch off. I know they got other things to do, but we can't afford to do that, right? So the Sakriya Puravasi, active citizen, means remain engaged between elections. Do not just focus your energies solely on elections, particularly when we have these flawed, problematic electoral systems that privilege money, privilege brand names. I mean, it's not an accident that most of the people are coming with their parents' names, because that's the way you build up the capital to get elected. So I think that instead of looking only at, Aragalaya was a form of protest, we all respect that. I think it achieved many things, and again, I was talking to some foreign lawmakers, and they said, how many people died? And I said, roughly 12. I said, wow, how did that happen, right? You're a wonderful country that you managed to make these kinds of changes with relatively low loss of life, right? But that's not the only form. These things take different forms. So I think that if we can get it into different forms, I think the kind of 50 plus petitions being launched against the online safety bill, I don't think that would have happened if not for the Aragale. It's that new environment that we are in, of the more active citizens that we have, that we are getting these kinds of changes. So let's not say that it has to be holding placards and standing in street corners. That's not the only way this game is going to get played. So I think the really important thing is that we have to understand. Now, when I brought up, I'll close with this. When I brought up the question of the VAT, I personally am against it. I have been against it for a long time. But on the other hand, I do understand the problem with why the VAT is being increased. Because we no longer have the license, we don't have the legal ability, actually until January, to print money in colloquial terms, right? We have reached the limit. We are a bankrupt country, we can't take loans. Those days, politicians were saying, hey, you want a salary increase, I'll give you, right? Election is coming, I'll give you salary increase. Every time between presidential election and general election, I have tracked it. Double-digit expenditures increases in government recurrent expenditures. Mahapula would be increased, Samurdhi would be increased, government servants would be given 10,000 rupees, all kinds of things that we couldn't afford would be done. Now the problem is, we cannot afford the salary increases that the trade unions were asking for, and we cannot afford the salary increases that the government has offered. What is the solution? We have to have this conversation. It can't be just said, no, we can't afford, therefore we are not giving. But we have to say, what are we going to do about it, right? What are we going to do about it? One of the things that we have to do is the state minister for defense brought up the idea of the Grama Rakshaka. I don't know what they're called in Sinhala. Civil defense? Yeah, I mean, they're guarding temples now. From what? Right? The temples should have their own protection. And they're just loafing around with guns, 34,000 people or whatever, right? There's 11,000 people being employed, all more or less from the Hambantota district, who are being employed by the Expressway Authority, right? 11,000, for God's sake. I can't even imagine what to do with 11,000 people on highways, right? We have to start asking these questions. Now, the minute you start asking these questions, if we do not frame the issue in the media and in Parliament, oh, we should be giving them more money. That's why I say the opposition is dysfunctional. If you want, I'll tell you who said it, when, and how. I'll tell you, right? I'm not going to get into that, but that's what the opposition said. These are reasonable conversations we should have. Should we have a 300,000 person army 15 years after the war? These are questions we have to ask, and we have to have a reasonable conversation about them without people saying, you're trying to attack the national security, you're a traitor, you're this, you're that. I have been called these things. By people inside Parliament, right? Some chairman of one of these oversight committees, right? The question is, we have to have a civilized conversation about these issues, and that is how you'll reduce the gap, the divide between politics and the people. Not by saying, we have to keep all the people in employment, we have to not charge taxes, and we have to drive the country into bankruptcy. That's not how you do it. You have to tell people what the hard choices we face are. And that should be our democracy, not this cheap sloganeering and cheap politicking that we will see in the next few months. Because that's what we've been doing. And that's what got us into this hole for the last 70 years. Unless we change that, I will continue to say that not only the opposition, but I will continue to say that all political parties in Sri Lanka are dysfunctional. I will proudly own that accusation, and I will continue to say that, because they are not doing what is in the interest of the people of this country.
Thank you very much, Professor Rohan Samanjiva, Chair of Learn Asia, Attorney at Law Kaushal Navaratna, President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Attorney at Law Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Center for Policy Alternatives, Dr. Mahim Mendis, Senior Lecturer, Open University of Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, Newsfirst. Thank you very much, Shihar, for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. I leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. If you put this parliament in charge of the Sahara Desert, in 5 years, there'll be a shortage of sand. Take care and good night.